Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've got a full review to do for you, and kind of an apology. So, I did a first impressions video on this knife, and it just frankly got lost. I think what happened is I thought it was part of another clip, and when I was editing, I thought I was done with it, and then I deleted it, or I don't know. But this is the Spyderco Pikal, and because I've now had it for like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, and I've carried it a bunch, and I've kind of feel like I've figured it out, I'm just going to do my full review on it rather than acting like it's a first impressions, because that wouldn't make any sense at all. So this is a very interesting Spyderco. I think I'd probably seen photos of them passively and never really paid attention, but I wasn't aware of this knife's existence until not that long ago. It's one of those models that it's kind of obscure to begin with, and it wasn't really in my wheelhouse of things I looked for, and so I wasn't acutely aware of it. But it's very interesting, and I'm really glad that I've been experiencing it, and I've kind of found that I like it a lot more than I thought I would. So the idea behind this knife, as you can see, the shape of it is atypical. This is not your normal Spyderco shape. This doesn't look like a Para 3 or a PM2 or a Manix or a Shaman. It's a very different design, and it's specifically designed to be used in a particular type of martial arts called Pikal martial arts, from what I understand. Or the style of Pikal, I don't know, I'm probably butchering how you explain that, but for people who practice Pikal, this is the type of fighting blade that they use, where it's reverse grip, kind of hawkbill, and edge toward you for dragging. And so it's a very interesting thing for me, somebody who's never trained in Pikal, because on paper it seems like it's upside down and backwards, right? Like normally most knives are held like this. That's the typical way in my brain that a knife is held. Edge away from you and blade up above your hand. So obviously knives have been used in a myriad of ways for a very long time. To say that this is the right way to hold a knife is wrong. There's not necessarily a right way to hold a knife. It's the right way to hold it for what? But it's interesting to me to have a knife that's designed to be held like this, because I have a lot of knives that are good in reverse grip, but this is best in reverse grip. It's designed for reverse grip, and it's designed for reverse grip and for cutting flesh, which is just, it makes it inherently really cool. If you ever wanted to be an action hero, like I'm sure most of us did. But yeah, so it's an atypical knife, but what I've been most floored by is how well I've found it works as a typical knife. Because a lot of knives, when you really streamline them for a specific task, the rest of their functionality for regular tasks kind of goes by the wayside. And this definitely, it feels like it was designed to do what I just described, but it's also way better at normal knife stuff than I ever imagined it would be. It's CPM S30V, G10, ball bearing lock, and a non-deep carry wire clip. I forget what it was. In the Cut Club box, there was another knife that had this style clip on it. It was a wire clip that wasn't deep carry. Oh, that's gonna bug me. I don't know, if you watch my video of going through all of them, you'll see what it was. But I had never owned a knife with a wire clip that wasn't deep carry before. I still think I may get a deep carry wire clip to go on here, because I would prefer that, frankly. But I've had this knife in pocket a bunch of times. It's one of those knives that's small enough that I can carry it as a secondary if I'm going kind of heavy, and so I've done that a few times. I've also carried it as a primary a few times, and I like the idea, frankly, of my primary being very good for self-defense. Hope I don't ever have to use a knife for self-defense, but if I did, here's a pretty good option. Yeah. So we've got G10 steel liners, wire clip, S30V blade, and Spyderco's ball bearing lock, which when I think ball bearing lock, I think Manix 2. If you've had a Manix 2, this lock feels the same. It's the same lock. You get a ball bearing, spring loaded, that sits in the channel kind of a little bit axis lock style, kind of like a compression lock, but coming in from a different direction. Anyway, it's a cool lock that's very reliable, and the lockup on this is very, very good. I do have, the way it's tuned right now, there's the slightest wiggle side to side. I imagine I could tighten this pivot and kind of lock that down, but then it might not drop quite as easily as it does. So there's a give and take there. Front to back, there's zero blade play. It's solid. So yeah, that's the construction we're working with, and it's a pretty typical Spyderco construction, right? Black G10, satin S30V, one of their in-house lock types. Like, it seems like a Spyderco, but you look at it and it doesn't. It's a very different, very out there shape. What's crazy too is how shaped this handle is. If you look at those two main grooves here and down here, it looks like this knife would probably suck in hand. And if you hold it in certain grips, those grooves are weird and kind of annoying and off-putting. But I find that if you just, like, if I tune my fingers to go into these grips that way, come on, focus, then it's actually quite pleasant to hold in like a normal saber grip and do typical cutting with. I can also keep my thumb in this groove still and then choke my whole hand up, and yeah, my middle finger goes into this groove a little bit, but it also like locks the knife into my hand in a crazy way that you don't typically get with a really neutral handle. So I found that, like, for typical EDC cutting tasks where I'm cutting like I normally would with any other knife, this knife actually performs quite well. And the whole thing is a recurve, right? It's a hawkbill, so we've got this like inward curve the whole way, and I'm not super used to cutting with that blade shape, but the tip penetrates material like crazy. It's meant to go into the human body, right? And then it slices stupid well. It's like, it's actually kind of great to use for opening boxes and cutting paracord and getting into zip ties, and like, it does really well for all that stuff. So the reality is, this knife is super different. It's outside of my expertise to comment on how good it actually is for this style of martial arts. And I'm not a knife fighter. I have not extensively trained in knife fighting. I'm not going to pretend that I have and act like, wow, this has got to be the ultimate fighting knife, because I'm not a knife fighter. But I will say, it's compelling and it feels really cool that it's designed to do that. And I don't know, there's just something that like tickles the teenage me. That sounds weird and creepy, but something that taps into my youthful spirit and just makes this extra fun to own and to have. But it's usable enough that I can justify it too, because like a while ago I had a Microtech dagger. Fixed blade dagger. It was a Borka design, the SBD dagger, and that thing was so cool. One of the coolest knives, objectively, that I've ever owned. But it was just so useless for me to own at the end of the day. I wasn't going to go out and actually like cut anything with that. I'm not running like a tactical rig where I've got a fixed blade vertical. Like, I'm not set up like that. And I have knives that fit a pretty tactical application, and I think there's certainly an argument for that. But that was just like too tactical to make any sense for my lifestyle, and it was kind of expensive, and so it was easier for me to pass it along to somebody else for what I got it for and turn it into something else to try out. And I was stoked I tried it out. But this is exciting for a lot of those same reasons. It's like a fighting knife. It's literally designed to be a fighting knife, which makes it so cool to hold and use and just like fantasize about, right? But it's also good enough to use for normal stuff that it's justifiable to have in the collection, to carry on a normal day, and to open stuff with, like we normally do with our knives when you're not disemboweling other human beings in a knife fight. So I like it way more than I thought I was going to. I assumed that this was going to be like a super quick turnaround. I would review it, and then a week later I'd probably sell it. But I may sell it, if I'm being totally honest, eventually. We'll see how much it keeps going in pocket. But it's fun enough that I'm really tempted to just keep it. It's a really cool knife. One thing you may have noticed as well, I keep forgetting to mention, it has this hole drilled right here. and with the knife came this little steel bar that screws into that hole and acts as a wave feature. I tried carrying it for the first little bit with that wave feature on it, and I just prefer it without it. I could easily screw it back on anytime and then carry it for the day with that. If I'm being objectively honest with myself, I don't prefer waves. There are certain knives with wave features that it's fine, like my ZTO 620. I know when I'm carrying it, I have to anticipate that when I pull it out of my pocket, I'm going to catch the wave. It's going to be a whole thing. But I prefer to just have standard deployment methods, if I'm being totally honest. I don't feel that the wave adds any value to this knife for me, and I have a more fun time carrying it without it. It's just more fun for me to fidget with, and it feels more... it's more within my habitual tendencies to pull a knife out and then open it. And so that's the way I've been carrying it. But the wave feature worked excellently well as a wave feature, so I think that's worth saying. Anyway, this has been a little bit all over the place. This is probably a kind of a different review, but overall those are kind of my thoughts about this knife. It's an atypical knife, so I guess it gets a little bit of an atypical review. The reality is that it's super cool for being a fighting knife, but it works pretty dang well as being a normal knife as well, and that's really cool to me. That's the story of the Pikal, if you will. So thanks for checking it out with me. Thanks for watching. I appreciate all of my subscribers, all of my supporters, everybody who follows me on Instagram, all of my Patreon patrons especially. Thank you guys. If you haven't seen, I've got a Patreon giveaway that's I'll be drawing on Monday. That should be live right now when you're watching this. So anyways, thank you to everybody. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome, and this has been a fun one.